12 strings top, and I want to join these two edges to be perfectly flat and square to each other. He always marks them so that you know which edges go together, and the pencil marks are up here that I'm looking at. So I just fold it together like so. I'm going to run it through the joiner with a very light pass. And so here we go. You know, it's hard to tell whether it's good enough just by running it through there one time, but it looks pretty good. I think it's just a tiny bit high in the center, if anything, but maybe not. What I have to do is put it in a bright light, hold it up like this to a bright light, and look up and down the seam and see if there's any light coming through. So I'll do that now. When I put these two boards together, I have looked through the seam created by them, and I can see that they're touching in this area here, but there's very light cracks on both ends. So in the middle here, or down the lower middle, it's touching, but there's light, very light amount of light coming through the rest of it. So if I sand that just a little bit, it should be just fine. So I've got my sandpaper on my joiner table here, and I'm going to hit the high spot, which is mostly in this area. Rub it through there just a time or two, and it should be just fine. Doesn't take much. That may be enough. I'll check it again and I'll show you where we are at. Well, I'm about ready to join this 12-string top. As you can see, I have a rig set up here. This is just a rough board, but it's got one jointed edge that's perfectly straight. I have one edge of the top against that, one edge of the top against this other jointed board, and then you can probably see this little strip of wood under here. This wood is a little more than an 1/8 inch thick, and it goes right down the joint of the top. That makes it, you know, a little bit like a tent. It's peaked up high in the middle. That gives you just enough pressure when you take this out and you push it down, that's just enough pressure to close that seam entirely. So we're about ready to put glue on that seam. I also have wax paper down, or in this case it's actually parchment paper. Ordinarily I always use Titebond Original, but you know, I've started thinking about things and on particular joints that I don't ever want to come apart, like the top of this guitar, I'm just going to go ahead and use Titebond 3. Why not? And I'm using the glue spreader that I was born with. These glue spreaders are cheap and they work pretty darn good. And I'm just cleaning the bottom edge because I don't want any extra squeeze out there. And I'll lay this one down and I'll do the same on this. I'll put the glue on this edge, and I've already got quite a bit on my fingers, so I might as well make use of it. Alright, and again I'll just clean off the bottom edge there. And now I'll just kind of lift them both in the center, line them up best I can, set them down on top of that little strip of wood. They're lined up pretty well. I'll pull out the strip of wood now, and I should be able to close this down, but I'm going to clean off my hands first. Okay, I've got the strip out. I've got the glue between the two boards, the joint there. The joint is relatively level. I'm going to push it down flat. I'm going to take this paper towel and try to clean off the excess squeeze out here. In fact, maybe I'll do a little more than that. I'll get some water and clean that off a little bit better, because now that I think about it, this is not water soluble glue, so I don't want to leave that on there. So I'll be back in just a moment. Okay, now I've got a wet rag here and I'll clean up this glue best I can. Okay, and then I've got my roller and I want to roll this out. I've learned that rolling this really does help get it a little bit flatter. We don't have any margin for error, as thin as these pieces are made. Now I've put a piece of wax paper over this and set a bunch of weights on it. Okay, we'll set that on there, and then I'm just going to get a whole bunch of heavy, like drawers full of screws and just stuff like that, just to sit on top there, and that should be fine. This drawer is exceptionally heavy, and it'll make a perfect deal to sit on there. And we'll let that sit for several hours before we mess with it at least. Here at the bandsaw, I'm ready to cut out this 12-string top. I'm just going to cut outside the line, leave myself a little room there. Here we go. Well, that turned out just fine. We'll move on to the next step. Well, my friends, the 12-string top is pretty much ready for the next step. Order to give you the full disclosure. The truth of it is I forgot to thickness this top before I glued it together. It was already pretty close, but it could have used another 20 thousandths off of it. So I ran them through my commercial thickness sander, which is this job right here. And that worked fairly well. I put some new 100 grit sandpaper in there. It did a pretty good job, but that thing just isn't that accurate. And I've adjusted it and adjusted it and adjusted it. And for whatever reason, it domed the middle. The middle was higher. So, you know, you put it through and you turn around, you run it through, and of course, if it's got at least a little bit of slope to it, well, it's going to double that in the middle pretty much. So 5 thousandths slope, which is the thickness of a human hair, becomes 10 thousandths in the middle. And so I was at about 110 thousandths around the edges pretty much, but in the middle, down through the middle, it was about 120 thousandths. So I went ahead and took that down with an orbital sander. I did all that work off camera because it's not my normal way of doing it, so I didn't bother showing it. But anyway, it turned out real nice. It's real flat and clean. It's got a real nice sound to it, deep tone. Let me wipe off the extra sawdust here. And we'll tap on it. I don't know how much value this is, tapping on these things for you guys, but I like to listen to them myself, so I'm letting you hear it. And here we go. Not too much there. Let me hear it. Hold it. It all depends how you hold it. There it is. Quite a bit of long sustain. I can hear it that long. Now keep in mind, that's with my 66-year-old ears. I can hear it for a long time. And it's real flat, real good looking. Some of the best grain. It washes out the camera, but the grain is really flat and straight. Got a lot of medullary lines across it. Medullary rays, I think people call it. I don't care what you call stuff like that. It's of no value to me to know that. All I know is what I want to see in a top, and I'm seeing it in this top. Laying it on the guitar, you can see it slightly bigger than the sides all the way around, which is what I always try to do. And I think the next thing we'll be doing is working on the rosette. So we'll see where that goes. Well, as you can see, I have a large piece of, I believe this is the sapele, very similar to mahogany, almost exactly the same really, just a little difference in color. But anyway, we're going to make the neck out of this. It's really nice wood, and this is quarter sawn. So I'm going to saw off 2 blanks. As you know, I always make a multi-piece neck for strength and for looks. And so we're going to saw off a couple of strips here that we can laminate together.
Lord, I ain't no stranger now. No, I ain't no stranger now. 'Cause I've been introduced to the...
Well, I'm ready to glue up the pieces that I've cut on the bandsaw, and I've got some extra little blocks to glue on here. I just thought it would be important to tell you that the way I glue these up, and of course I'm not ready to glue these 2 together yet, but just to show you that the grain opposes one another. It's almost quarter sawn, but not perfectly quarter sawn, so I push those together. It's not so much for looks, but more for strength, I think. And then I've also kind of done the same thing with these, turned kind of the same similar way, similar fashion. It'll go together similarly like that. So what I'm going to do first is just glue up these two little extra blocks. This is so I'll have enough for the heel. And this is what you do when you don't have a board big enough. But it's perfectly fine. You won't even hardly see it when you glue it up if you get a good tight joint. And I'm rubbing this around here, as you can see, to make sure the glue sticks to both surfaces completely, and it does that way when you do that. I'll just let it sit there and get tacky for a minute, and then I'll put the clamps on it. I'll do the same thing on this one. It's amazing how fast the glue starts to stick. As you can see, when you get a good tight joint, it takes the air out of it and it's already ready to stick. You saw me apply the glue there and just move it around. So now the tricky part though is to keep it aligned while you clamp it, because it will want to slide around on you. We'll do something to make sure it doesn't slide. Not sure what that is yet, but we'll figure it out. Well, I've got all the parts ready for glue up on this. I've glued on a little wing here, as you can see. I'm ready to spread the glue and put these pieces together. It's basically going to be a 5-piece laminate. And here we go. I like these rollers for this a little better because it leaves the glue, I don't know how to explain it, it makes it look like it's more tacky because it leaves those little strings sticking up as you roll across it. I don't know. Seems to give it more surface area to have the glue make contact. So, if that makes any sense. I don't know if it makes sense or not, but it makes it look like the glue surface is rough, I guess is the easiest way to explain it, which makes you think it's going to make better contact. Again, I'm using my vacuum pressing systems bag here to glue this up. You could easily put a gazillion C-clamps on this, and I've done that many times over the years, but the truth is you need a lot of them. And as you're tightening all those C-clamps up, this continually moves and slides, and trust me, it's not fun. It's not pretty. This system is so much faster, so much easier. It makes this more fun to do for sure, I can tell you. Done it many times, so I guess I would say very strongly I much prefer doing it this way than using C-clamps. That should do it. These are the last two pieces that the glue needs to be spread on. Really does spread the glue out even with these rollers too, so it does a good job. Caleb's helping me out here by bringing over the saran wrap. That'll be nice. Here we can wrap this thing up. That kind of helps hold it in place a little bit, and then we'll put it in the vacuum bag. I've got a platen in here and it'll lay on top of that. The platen has air slots cut through it so the air can circulate underneath this. And we'll put it in here, try to get it one last little bit of an alignment. Hopefully it'll behave and do its thing. If anything is difficult on this, this would be the most difficult part, and it's not too terribly bad. Just takes a little bit of hand strength to get these to close up. And as long as I don't use my thumbs too much, it's not too bad. I can still close it with my fingers. That seems to be okay. I got the black a little further that way than I should have, but I think it'll be fine. We'll give it a shot here. Oh, I meant to put this platen on top. Doggone it. All right, well, I made a mistake, so I'll take this open. And I have a round platen. This is rounded off on the corners and everything, and that'll keep the bag from pulling on those real sharp corners. Not that big a deal. I just should have remembered to put it in there, or forgot. Okay, it's in there now. We can do this again. You can use the squeeze clamps to close this, but that's a little awkward. It works, though. If you didn't have the strength in your hands, you could easily use those squeeze clamps to get it to close. But I believe we're good. I'm going to get that platen back on there straight. There it is. I think we're good to turn it on. I'll turn on the pump here. I'm going to turn it on to auto cycling. And it really works better if you plug it in. I don't ever do anything out of order. You know, that was all planned, just so you know. Auto cycling, yes, we're on, and you can hear it. And it starts drawing the air out of the bag almost immediately. I'll let you watch the bag. It'll start sucking down here. And I can see the plastic starting to move. Because this is so tall and odd shaped, I have a feeling the thing will cycle a lot more than with something thin and flat. So it may not seal as well right at the beginning, but it'll get there eventually. It's closing up. It's just taking its time getting there. It's really putting the pressure on it now, boy. You can tell. When it starts putting the pressure on it, there ain't no moving it after that. It's slid a little bit, so I'm going to open it up and move it a little bit. That's just the way it is. Alright. Not real happy with the alignment down here. Try it one more time, maybe. That's a little better, I think. It'll probably kick off here in a minute. But like I said, it may take it more. Now it kicked off. I have a feeling it might be a little more of a problem keeping the air on this one because of the odd irregular shape. Right there's a sharp spot right there. I'm afraid that might cut through my bag. We'll let that sit for a while. A little bit sharp spot right there on the corner, which I didn't see. I think I'll just let it sit there though. Hope the bag doesn't get tore right there. Well, my friends, the neck is out of the vacuum press. Be sure to check out Vacuum Pressing Systems for a vacuum press. No better way to glue up weird flat things. And this one glued up fine and everything would be honky-dory perfect. And it will work eventually, but just not on this guitar. You know, if I was building a 6-string, it's perfect. But remember, we're building a 12-string. So it's just I missed it by that much. Yeah, I did it again. I got sidetracked and just, you know, you get in a hurry and everything's in a hurry for me all the time. I mean, I constantly am in a rush. So basically, this one's Caleb's fault for not catching it. So, you know, that's what I hire him for. He's supposed to catch my mistakes and, you know, keep me going, but he failed. Looking for a new apprentice. Anyway, you gotta blame somebody. I did a few days ago machine this drill guide for a 12 string, so it wasn't like I didn't know I'm building a 12 string. But that was several days ago. And, you know, a lot of water has run under the bridge since then. So, but I could go back and reenact how I built this if somebody would like to see this maybe in a future shop talk. It's precision made, meaning that, you know, you can lay it directly on the part, clamp it to the part actually, drill right through this, and the holes will be right where they should be. And you might say, well, how did you do that? I mean, you can easily take a ruler and a punch and measure it, but I don't care how precise you think you are, it won't be that precise. The drill bit will wander, you know, back and forth, you know, with the grain of the wood, all kinds of things. You'll never get it perfect that way. This is, I wouldn't say it's perfect, but it's real close to perfect. And the way I did that was on a milling machine. And I could show that in a future shop talk on how to set up for that if somebody was interested in that. You know, you'll have to let me know in the comments, which means that I will have to start watching the comments again. And this is late January, and I haven't been looking at the comments since about Christmas. And the reason is, I think I just have comment burnout with this chest cold and everything else. And I got 1,000 excuses if you want to hear them. Anyway, so let me know if you do want to see that. This wonderful piece of work will go on the shelf, and I'll be a leg up on a future 6-string guitar. You know, everything I do has to be in a hurry, and that is because, just like today, as I make the new block for the 12-string, I can only work till about noon because I've got to go out and cut and haul in a bunch more firewood. Just part of winter living out here, especially with a house like ours. As you've seen, I made a mistake on that 12-string neck, and so I've got to cut some more veneer to go into the 12-string neck because I don't have any veneer large enough. And so I'm back to the AccuSlice system. I've got a piece of walnut that was cut here on the farm on the machine, and we're ready to slice it off. I first butted the piece up against the blade. I dialed in 50 thousandths that way, which is about the thickness of the blade. Then I dialed in another 110 thousandths so that I get at least a 100 thousandths piece. This first piece is rough. That's why I put a little bit of extra there, and I'm sure I'll be able to sand it down and make a good piece out of it. So here we go. Okay, you can see it cut off a real nice slice. It does a really good job. And now this blade is right flush with the piece of wood. So I'm going to bring you over here and show you how I actually adjust the dial up close. Okay, I know you can't see the top of the dial, but the top of the dial right here is 30 thousandths at the moment. Now, I have just loosened these magnets so that the table can slide. This only goes up to 50 thousandths, so I'm going to spin it one full revolution to 30. That will be a total of 50 thousandths feed that way. And then I'm going to spin it to 30 again. Now I've got a 50 thousandths board when I do that. And if I go to 30 again, I've got a 100 thousandths board. And then I'm going to add another 5 just for good measure. So we should be sitting pretty there. If I didn't make a mistake, and I don't think I did. Looks pretty good to me. So I think we're ready to make the next cut. So now we just lock down these magnets, and the table's stationary that way. And now we're ready to slide it through again. I'm not going to show any more cutting. I just wanted to show you how it is adjusted. It's a very easy process. Well, if these are in the right order, you just saw me make some veneer over there on the AccuSlice system sent to me by John Manura. Look up AccuSlice It's a great product. Again, I just want to be clear. It's not a cheap machine. It's not inexpensive. It is expensive. However, you won't find anything that cuts the stuff this accurately. I mean, this thing is accurate. I got seven boards out of there that are 100 thousandths of an inch thick. And then the last scrap board here, which I haven't measured the thickness, but it's, I would say, I'm guessing 30 to 40 thousandths, maybe 50. I don't know. It's actually 60, according to that. 62. So, you know, the last one's still a usable board. Yeah, I think it varies a little bit in thickness in different places because the board wasn't perfectly flat out of the sawmill, and I tried to, you know, knock it a little bit more flat before I glued it up. By the way, the method of choice for me for gluing them to the sacrificial board on that is to, you know, stick a piece of tape on the sacrificial board, stick a piece of tape on my workpiece, put CA glue between it. The tape then will peel off later when you want to detach it. That seems to be a great method for using the AccuSlice. And you know, you make sure that the board is mounted flush to your table so that all the down pressure, the board is sitting on the table from the down pressure of the blade. Works great. I mean, I couldn't be happier. So I say thank you again to John Manure for sending me that machine. It is just awesome. Well, it's the next day. This is all dried up and glued up and etc. I have drawn the profile on there that you can see for the neck and for the 12 string here, so you can see the long peg head. I've run the top through the planer, or joiner actually, to square it up to the sides and to make it good and flat. One of the things I often forget to do until later, and I always do it, it's just that the order of operations is much easier if I do it now, and that is cut this truss rod slip. Whoops, Freudian slip there. Cut that out, Melissa. Cut this truss rod slot, and I'm going to do that right now over at the table saw. So here we go. I've got the table saw set up to cut the truss rod slot, and I thought I'd tell you a couple things about setup on something like this. It just makes your day easier, and that is, first thing I do is I just approximate everything, and then I run a piece of scrap wood through here, and then I take my calipers and I measure the depth of the slot. Well, I've adjusted that a couple of times here off camera, and I've already got the blade set to the proper height, and I now have it tightened down so it shouldn't move. That's the first thing. That's the easy way to set your height, rather than just trying to measure the blade. So the next thing is, you know, especially for me, this is easy because I've got this stripe right down the very center, and you can see that there. So all I do is I just eyeball the center of the blade and set my fence by eyeball to the center. It doesn't have to be perfect. As long as you're real close, you'll be fine. The reason I say that is because what you do is you run it through one way, then you flip your part around and you run it through the other way. Now that only works obviously if these boards are the same thickness, and I know mine are to within a couple thousandths. So I know they're very close to being exactly the same. So I can run it through one way, turn it around, run it through again, and that will instantly put the slot in the very center. Then I can just take my truss rod and see if it fits, and if not, I just bump the fence just ever so slightly, or however much I think I need it, to one side. In other words, you would bump it half the amount you think you need. In other words, if you needed an 1/8 of an inch more, you would only bump it a 1/16 of an inch, if that makes sense, because you're going to push it through and then turn it around and push it through again. That keeps the slot right down the center. That way you don't have to do all this crazy measuring and all of that complicated stuff. This is the easy way to do it, and it's the practical way to do it. So here we go with our first cut. Now you can probably see that the cut went almost right down dead center, but it probably is leaning a little toward this side. This white strip is a tiny bit thinner than this white strip, and all I have to do then is turn this around and run it through again. Now the only problem I have is I can't remember which way I ran it through. I can't remember if I ran that one through or this one through. I'd have to go back and look at my video, because talking here was my goal rather than keeping this straight. But anyway, I can lean it up here and figure that out. It looks like I fed it through that way. Yeah, I think that's the way I fed it through. Well, it doesn't really matter. I can feed it through twice. I did it correctly, and you can see now they're equal on both sides. The amount of wood left is perfect. Now that slot is very thin. It's just very slightly wider than the thickness of that blade. And that's a thin blade, by the way. So now I just need to get my truss rod and lay it here and see how much more I need to take off of it. I went through my scrap bin, so to speak, and found this nice steel rod. And I've already verified that it bends. You definitely want a rod that will bend rather than break. In other words, if you put this in a vise and beat it over with a hammer, it would bend rather than break. Cold rolled steel is a good choice for a truss rod, in my opinion. If you get a brittle type metal and you start putting a lot of stress on it, it could likely crack and break on you, and you wouldn't want that. So this is more than long enough. In fact, it's quite long. I just went ahead and took a wire wheel to it to polish it up and make it nice and clean. But this is a little larger than I typically use. I usually use a 3/16" rod. This is 212 thousandths. And 212 thousandths is smaller than a 1/4 inch, but larger than 3/16. So it's kind of right in the middle there. But I think that's the perfect size truss rod for a 12-string guitar. So that's what I'm going to use. So now I lay it on the slot, and it basically just takes out the white. So when I look down on it, so basically I want a slot that's just gonna barely take out the white. So I just do this in steps. I'll just bump my fence over just slightly, and we'll run this thing through both ways real quick and see if it fits, and if not, we'll do it again. Well, I can tell I didn't take off very much, and that's okay. So it's obviously not going to fit. I can bump it over a little more this time. That's probably going to be real close, so we'll try that again. Okay, once again, I'm almost positive it won't fit because I can still see a tiny bit of the white, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to remove all the white in order to get this to fit. And it's really close to going, but it's not going to go yet. So one more pass, sneak up on it a little bit more. There you go. I got a nice fit in there. It's a little tiny bit looser than I would like, but it's going to be fine. I've seen them both ways. I've seen them too tight and I've seen them too loose. This one's a little bit loose. I bumped it a little more than I thought I did, I guess, but it's fine. It shouldn't be a problem. And in fact, a lot of folks take a soda straw and cover the rod with a soda straw, and I might even do that in this case here because of the fact that it's a 12-string again, and I'm going to want this rod to be ultra flexible down inside that slot and be able to really pull hard on that neck if I need to. So I might even do the soda straw trick on this one because I do have room for it this time. Often I don't have room for it, but I think we'll be fine. Well, I think we're ready to profile this and try to make these cuts. I'm going to try to be careful and make sure I don't cut into this top or this area here especially. You want to leave the pencil lines for the most part. I like to get really close to them, but I don't want to cut into them, if that makes any sense to you. As close as I can get and still leave them.
Sinners run and hide your face. Sinners run
Well, that went real well. I'm happy with that. I don't think I got into my lines anywhere, but I got very, very close to my lines. And so that just saves a lot of extra work. Now we'll need to make the wings that go on here and get those glued on. Or, I'm not sure, I might do some profiling first. It doesn't make too much difference on that. This is a little easier to hold in the vise this way because it's narrower. On the other hand, if you put parallel wings on there, it's easy to hold in the vise as long as you have a large enough vise. And I do. So either way, it works okay. I'm going to give it a little thought and see where I want to go next. My friends, it's been several days, almost a week I'd say, since I've really worked on the 12-string guitar much. At least 4 or 5 days. And I'm kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. I've got this much done on the neck. I've got the top joined together. I've got the sides pretty much finished except for some reinforcement on the sides. But I can't really go any further on the top, and I can't attach the top to the sides until I get a rosette. I don't like to do the same design on any 2 instruments on a rosette like that, so I'm trying to come up with something unique, and I'm using Inkscape. And Inkscape and I have this love-hate relationship, and all that really means is Inkscape loves to hate me. And everything I try in Inkscape just seems to kind of go south, because I'm no expert in Inkscape, and at my late age, I doubt I'll ever will be. So I'm monkeying with that. In fact, just off camera here, Caleb is actually monkeying with it right now, as you can see. He's trying his hand to see if he can come up with an idea. You know, it's one of those deals where it's simple, but it's complicated, and it's especially complicated today. My buddy John Manura sent me a whole bunch of binding and purfling that he made with his AccuSlice system. And I definitely want to incorporate some of his stuff into this guitar if I can. The problem is, you know, and I don't hear this as a complaint, because it's not. The problem is each of the different pieces that he sent me is basically 4 pieces. And that would look like that would be enough. Unfortunately, it isn't. You know, in other words, you can't do all the binding around the top, all the binding around the back, all the binding around the fretboard and around the peg head, all with just 4 pieces. Now, if they were really, really, really long pieces, you probably could. But he also sent some purfling, which is just beautiful. I mean, I don't know if the camera is going to focus on this or not. It's Padauk, and it's 5 pieces of Padauk and maple. And so I'm going to use this purfling, at least, if I can get it to bend, to wrap the rosette with that. In other words, I'll put a ring of this on the outside of the rosette and a ring of this on the inside. So thank you, John, for sending me this. I will incorporate this into the guitar for sure. Now, the question is, can we progress and come up with some sort of a nice, unique rosette for this guitar? We'll keep you posted. Thought I'd let you see some of the activity that Caleb is trying here on Inkscape. He seems to be a little more into Inkscape than I am. And I'm saying, you know, have at it. Won't hurt my pride none. It keeps doing things that even he doesn't expect. And it's a whole lot of fun, and it doesn't do what you think it's going to do when you do what you think you should do.
My circle should be linked to this rectangle, right? The rectangle is what gives it the pattern.
I'm only...
Because when I change the rectangle, it changes the circle.
Yeah,
Until it doesn't.
I see that, I just don't understand why that is.
Until it doesn't. Because now,
yeah,
for some reason, it has delinked my rectangle to my circle.
It's not changing it now. Ain't that special?
It's great.
Just one of the many issues we have here at Rosa Stringworks. Well, my friends, We've made progress on that rosette, and I think we've got that where we want it. We got a different issue that keeps reoccurring. You know, when this was just a one-man shop, none of this seemed to be a problem. But now, because we have 3 folks here in this shop, it's kind of an issue, and that is we're always getting in each other's way. And Melissa's the queen of that office in there, and you know, the laser cutter's in there, and it's hard to get to, it's hard to use because she's on that computer all the time, and that computer drives the laser cutter. I've got a computer right here at my desk. I think it's time to move the laser cutter in here. So this 12-string build, it's gone off on a few tangents, you know, and this is yet another tangent of the 12-string build. So here we go. I'm going to try to move the laser cutter about like right back here behind my desk, and we're going to vent it out this side wall over here that you can't really see. We'll just film bits and pieces of it as we go, because it's quite a job to move this thing, and probably quite a job to get it to talk to this computer and get it all ready to go. Although I think that's the easy part. Physically, we have to cut a hole and exhaust it out that way, because it does burn wood and that exhaust has to go somewhere. So, here we go. Well, my friends, I've got the laser cutter moved in here with a little help from Caleb. We moved in the desk also. There's a desk under this. So the laser cutter's sitting here. We have the exhaust fan right here that goes on the back of it, and it is pointed at this wall right here. So we're going to have to drill a big hole to get the exhaust through this wall, and then we'll put a dryer vent basically outside. Now that's a hole saw. There you go. This is one of those that will twist your wrist off when you're using it, so you got to be very careful using a saw like this. And I'm not being silly, these really can hurt you, so you want to be careful with this. So here we go. Actually, I probably going to go just a hair above that mark. Ow! Like I said, yep, it's not going to cooperate. Very difficult to do. This saw can hurt you, it really can. I'm twisting the handle into, I can feel the handle in this drill twisting and flexing right here. It's like it's where the seam is, I can feel the seam separating. That's how much torque this thing has. It's a very powerful drill, and when you got something that big around, it puts a lot of torque on it, and you better have a hold of it. Trust me, it can hurt you really bad. About got it. Woohoo! Success! We have a hole. Well, my friends, as you can see, we have the laser cutter all installed, all hooked up, and everything seems to be working correctly. Haven't done a test job yet, but off camera, Caleb worked on that rosette idea that I had a little bit more, and we think we've got a good trial. So here we go. We're going to give it a shot and see what it looks like. We're going to just kind of draw it on paper first, and the way I draw it on paper is I turn the laser cutter on and I set it on a very low amperage. So like it's on 21 or something now. I'm going to set it at about 9.5. That's low enough that I've learned that it won't cut through the paper, but it will scorch the paper. So we'll set a piece of paper in here, and then we'll give you a close-up of the machine working.
Cry
My friends, we've got the idea worked out, the pattern worked out. And what was bothering me was that we had this much waste on every time we cut out one of these rosette. And because of that waste, I said something about that to him. I said, I don't know if this design is worth it because we got 3 colors. We're gonna have to cut them out twice each, so that's 6 times, and we got that much waste. Caleb came up with the genius idea. He said, why don't we just separate them and locate them like this? So we cut this out of paper, and you can see this was the area we had to cut one before. Now we've cut one out of this little bitty tiny area. So it saves so much wood and saves so much waste that it was a brilliant idea. So now I can cut out one full ring of one color out of that much wood. And I would be ready to do that, except for one more problem. So this 12 string is going off on yet one more tangent. And that is another thing that's always bothered me about this laser cutter is there's no way to accurately adjust the height. And the height is critical. If you get the top of your thing you're cutting at exactly 0.375 inches, which is just an arbitrary number that I measured, and it worked out to be that number. If you get it to that number, if you get the top of your project right there, it cuts a perfect tiny little line. It's just perfect. If you get it lower than that, it cuts a broader line, because it's basically the beam is coming in and crosses like this. And if you get the height exactly where it crosses, then that beam is really hot and it works very tiny. So that's the tangent. I'm going to go over to the laser cutter and figure out a way to make a bed that I can adjust and get it very accurate. Here we go.